Hello, hello. Brian here with the ESL Success Club. How are you today? I hope you're well. I'm doing well. Today we're going to be, or actually today I have a presentation for you. Actually, I have two presentations for you. And we're going to be talking about the environment. We're going to break this up, like I said, into two presentations. So we're going to start with one, then we're going to take a break, then we're going to move on to the next. Okay? So let's jump right in. Share screen. All righty, here we go. So again, I'm Brian, and I'm with the ESL Success Club, and today we're going to be talking about the environment. So, what is the environment? Well, the environment is everything that surrounds you. It's the trees, it's the air, it's the animals, it's the water, it's the rocks, it's everything. Now, Eliane and I grew up in different environments. Eliane grew up in Brazil, where most of you are, and I grew up here in the United States, in the northern part of the United States, where it gets cold and snowy. And we traveled to each other's environments because we wanted to see what each other's environment was like. And here you see a picture of when Eliane first came to my environment. Here she's in the cold and in the snow, all bundled up. And then later I traveled to her environment. And here's a picture of me down in the tropics in Brasilia. Very different environment from where I grew up. And when she visited me, or when she came here, it was a very different environment from where she grew up. But guess what? It's all the environment. It's all part of the environment. The environment is everything that surrounds you. And we call these environments ecosystems. So Eliane and I grew up in different ecosystems. We both grew up surrounded by the environment. Everybody grows up surrounded by the environment. But there are different ecosystems. It's a little bit different here in North America than it is down in South America. It's a little bit different than it is, say, in Antarctica or parts of Asia or Africa. Okay, these are ecosystems. But today what we're going to be talking about is ecosystem services. What do our ecosystems give to us? Okay, and it's pretty important. They give us everything. Take a deep breath in. That air that you just breathed in, guess what? That's an ecosystem service. Okay, if you have some water that you're drinking and it's nice clean water, that's also an ecosystem service. So today we're going to be talking about that. And we're going to use a couple examples. We're going to start off with an example from Brazil. And then we're going to talk about an example here in the US. So in order to talk about the example in Brazil, we have to go back a few years. Back in 2016, Rio, or as you'd say in English, Rio, the city of Rio de Janeiro, hosted the Olympics. These were the Summer Olympics. The Olympics that happened in the summertime that involved a lot of swimming. Okay. And Rio was chosen to host the Olympic Games in 2016, but Rio had a problem. What was that problem? You see a picture of it here. Many of the swimming events in Rio 2016 took place in Guanabara Bay, just outside of Rio. Here's a picture that was taken in Guanabara Bay. Can you see the water underneath? This man is in a canoe and he's paddling through water. But what do we have on top of the water? We have a lot of pollution. We have a lot of plastic, a lot of garbage. This was a picture that came out and said, this is where the Olympians are going to be swimming. A lot of the Olympians got a little nervous and they said, ooh, I don't know if I want to swim through that. Look at all that pollution. Look at all that garbage in there. That doesn't seem very healthy. Here's a picture that was also taken in Rio. of one of the landfills there, the Jardim Gramacho landfill. This is where some of Rio's garbage goes, where it's disposed of. And look at this picture. You can see that there are some wild animals here. In this case, they're wild hogs. They're in there, they're eating the garbage, they're pooping. Okay, look at that water. See that water that's in contact with the garbage? You think that water is very clean? It's not very clean. A lot of stuff, a lot of bad stuff, a lot of pollution that is in that garbage leaches into the water, which means it comes out of the garbage and it goes into the water. That water is very dirty there, okay? This scared a lot of people. And they said, I don't know if I want to go there to swim. Now, one thing that we have to talk about when we talk about water is what lives inside water. Okay, there are different organisms that live in the water than on land. Can you think of anything that lives in the water? Oh, I can think of some things: fish, dolphins, whales, shrimp, tiny little things. There are things of all sizes, big things and small things. And one of the smallest things that lives in water, just like up here on land, are bacteria. Everything in the environment is covered in bacteria. You and I are covered in bacteria. Right now on my skin, on your skin, it's covered in bacteria. Inside our bellies and our guts, guess what? There's a lot of bacteria in there. They help us. Those are good bacteria. They help us to live. And do you know what most, not all, but most bacteria breathe? They breathe the same thing you and I do. They breathe oxygen. Not all. There are some bacteria that breathe other things other than oxygen. There are some bacteria that can switch, and they'll breathe oxygen if it's available. And if it's not available, they'll switch to something else. That's pretty neat. We can't do that. Most animals can't do that. In fact, I can't think of any animal that can do that. Okay? But most bacteria, like I said, breathe oxygen, just like you and me. Now, in this water here, there's a lot of stuff for bacteria to eat. There's a lot of garbage. There's a lot of chemicals. Most bacteria can actually eat chemicals as food. Things like oils, okay? And while they're eating it, they're breathing as well. Now, they don't have noses and they don't have lungs like us, but they still take in that oxygen and they need it to breathe. And an interesting thing about bacteria is when there is a lot of food, the bacteria have lots and lots of babies. They reproduce very fast. And they gobble up all the food. Nom, 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 nom. And when the food goes away, most of those bacteria die off as well. And only a few stay around until there is more food. And then when there's more food, they have babies and babies and babies, and nom, 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 they eat it up, and then they die. But one thing that they do when there's a lot of food there, and they're eating, nom, 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 they're breathing a lot. They're using a lot of oxygen. And what animal do you think needs more oxygen? A tiny little bacteria or a fish? What do you think? Well, the answer is, the answer is fish need more. So what happens when pollution gets into water? Well, remember, most of that pollution, different oils, scraps of food, even poop and sewage, that's not food for people, but it can be food for bacteria. So when that gets into the water, remember, there's only a couple bacteria, and then they say food, and they start eating, and they start having babies and babies and babies. And they have babies and they eat until it's gone. And the whole time they're doing this, they're breathing as well. And most of them are breathing what? The same thing you and I and the fish are breathing oxygen. So when the bacteria get in there and they start having babies and they're eating all that waste and they're breathing all that oxygen, the fish that live in the same exact place, unless they can swim away, they're not going to have oxygen to breathe. And what happens then? Then they die. They suffocate and they die. And large events like this are called fish kills. This is when a lot of fish are killed very fast because there is so much pollution. It's not necessarily the pollution, the chemicals that kill them. It's that the bacteria that are eating those chemicals, eating that pollution, they suck up all the oxygen. And then the fish suffocate. They don't have enough oxygen to breathe and they die. This is called a fish kill. Okay, this picture was taken in Guaranbara Bay outside of Rio shortly before the Olympics in 2016. And the athletes saw this and people around the world saw this and they said, I don't know, do we want to go there? Do we want to be swimming in that water? It doesn't look very healthy. Look how polluted it is. Now, what do you think is going to happen with these fish here? All these dead fish. Sure, some will get eaten by birds. Some might get eaten by dogs. Some might get eaten by other fish. But the majority of these dead fish are going to rot. They're going to decay. And what's going to eat them as they decay? Those same bacteria. And now the bacteria are saying, yay, more food. And when they have more food, they have more what? They have more babies. So even though the level of oxygen in this water was too small for the fish to survive, that tiny little bacteria still has enough oxygen. So what happens is all these dead fish are providing more food for the bacteria, and the oxygen levels are going to continue to drop lower and lower and lower. And eventually there won't even be enough oxygen for those bacteria, and they're going to die. And then other bacteria that eat dead bacteria are going to come in, and they're going to eat them. Okay, but let's get back to the Olympics. Let's get back to Rio 2016. Oops. So what happened was the authorities said, you know what? We don't want people to think of Brazil like this. We don't want people to look at Rio and say, oh, it's all polluted and gross. So what are we going to do? We're going to clean this up. And the Guanabara Limpa project came about. And they went out there and they took a lot of that garbage. They took a lot of that pollution out of the water. And they made it nice and safe. And the Olympics happened. And the athletes came and they swam. And everything was great. But do you think that is still the case now? No. After the Olympics, things went back to normal. You can see here, there's a ship here outside of Rio. What's it releasing into the water? Some kind of oil. Could be diesel oil, could be fuel oil, could be crude oil. I don't know what it is. All I know is it's some kind of oil. Now, what's this oil going to do? It's going to serve as food for those bacteria that are in the water. The bacteria, there's only a couple of them, but when there's food, boom, the population explodes. And they have lots and lots of babies, and they eat, nom, 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 and they breathe, and they use all of the oxygen. So guess what? Here's a picture that was taken after the Olympics in the same place, Guaranbara Bay. Look at all those dead fish. Another huge fish kill. So the whole point of this talk up until now is that if we want the ecosystem to take care of us, we have to take care of it. Okay? When you're walking down the street and you're munching on a candy bar or something and you have that wrapper, you don't just throw the wrapper on the ground. You put it in the trash. We don't just dump our sewage, our poop, and our dirty water into the bay or into the river. You have to treat it. You have to clean it. The ecosystem is there to take care of us, but only if we take care of it. If we don't take care of the ecosystem, it cannot take care of us. Okay? So we've gone through half of the presentation already. Can you believe it? We've reached intermission. Intermission means break. We're going to take a little break now. Okay, Eliane is going to come back on and talk to you. Now, I want you to think about any new words that you might have learned. Excuse me, any new words that you might have learned in this first half. Think of if you have any questions for Eliane. And after you guys talk for a brief time, I'm going to be right back on and we're going to finish this presentation. Okay, so you're doing great so far. Keep it up. And I'll see you again in just a couple minutes.